That's it. We're live.
We're live.
Hey, Chase, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, David?
I'm great, and I'm super excited for this. This has been something I've been looking forward to since the idea came up.
Yeah, this is awesome. Me too.
Cool. Um, well, maybe I'll introduce myself for those of us just joining us. So my name is David Nash, and I'm the author of the novel In Wells Time, published by Unsolicited Press, and that came out in February. And it's a novel about a family and how we use our time and loss and a few other things. And I am joined by Chase Condrone. Chase,
Yeah, yeah. I'm Chase Condrone. I got the wonderful pleasure of narrating the audiobook for David's book In Wells Time, which, as his introduction sort of gave you a teaser about, is just a beautiful, wonderful story. So it was a pleasure to be a part of from start to finish.
Awesome. Well,
So yeah.
yeah, I mean, I like this is so cool finally getting to talk to you. I mean, we've really just kind of emailed back and forth, and because we first met essentially when, like, right, we were connected when I was introduced to you as the narrator who was going to be reading my novel and performing it for the audiobook format. And I will admit, I was like, oh my gosh, someone's gonna be reading my book out loud. And those are my words. And it felt strange. It was weird. I didn't know what it was gonna be like. And I mean, it felt, I don't know, you feel like exposed, I guess. Like, I obviously people read the book, right? But
Yeah.
like, you're reading it now to like lots of people. And that felt just more visible for some reason. So I was nervous, but once I started to get to kind of know your, just sort of learn more about you, and read sort of just our emails back and forth, I really got the sense that like this was going to be a great partnership. So, and I have gotten to listen to it, and I really enjoyed it. It was awesome. So it's just so fun listening. So first of all, I want to just thank you in front of everybody else for spending time with the story.
Oh, thank you, David. Yeah, it is such a weird process, right? Like taking your art, giving it to someone else, letting them put a hand in and all over it and perform it and bring it to life in a different medium. But as a narrator, it's such a pleasure to have like an awesome story and a great book, and on top of that, a great person behind that book. So after we got our emails back and forth, and the more we got to work together, and I saw bits of you in the writing that I got exposed to before I got to meet you and talk to you, and then to see that like you just come through as such an amazing person, and it's been such a smooth and fun and cool process. So yeah, just thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's really cool. And so what tonight is about, is I know I'm a fan of audiobooks. I've listened to quite a few, and then it's occurred to me, it's like, when do you ever hear the author and the narrator like chat? Or I don't know if they even know each other. I don't know any, like, I have other friends who are authors, but I don't have a lot of friends who are narrators. And so this seemed like a fun opportunity for us to just like come up with a bunch of questions, which, credit to you, I think came up with a lot of really good ones that got the ball rolling. And we're gonna just go back and forth. And I full disclosure, I looked at them quick, but I didn't spend too much time really thinking about them. So some of this is gonna be just like free flowing, and we'll see how it
Oh,
goes. But I'm excited to just learn more about, and just you, and we're gonna get into some kind of the cool like behind the scenes stuff, I think, about the story, which is gonna be great.
amazing. Agreed. Let's just be loosey goosey off the cuff. Why don't I start by asking you about sort of the crux of the story, right? So this story about Wells and about his family is really centered around this ability that's sort of passed down that lets them pause time, which is a really cool thing. Where did that concept come from? And that sort of crux, and what appealed to you as sort of a center for the story?
Yes. So great question. that is sort of, yeah, that's the where did the story come from question. So, I think it came from like 3 different spots that happened all sort of around the same time. So I had finished, I'd finished writing my first story, and that was about being published. And so I wasn't working on anything. And at the time, I had 2 kids. I still have 2 kids, but they were, gosh, maybe 4 or 5 and 2 or something like that. And they were growing really fast. And I remember, I'm fortunate enough that I don't really struggle with deep anxiety, but I get nervous like other people do too. And but I think had the one thing probably closest to a panic attack, where I was laying in bed one night, and somehow I got thinking about like the depth of space and eternity and forever, and some just small things that are great to sort of just ruminate on in the middle of the night. And that was just, I think really worried about how fast time was moving. My kids are growing up really, really quickly. So that's sort of setting the stage. Then I listened to a great podcast by the musician Joe Pug. And I think somewhere around that time I was out on a jog, and he read a poem that becomes important in this novel by Charles Bukowski called Nirvana. And that again, so that I really liked the way he read it. And I just sort of ruminated on that. It was a beautiful poem, but I didn't really put that together. But then I have a friend who I write with a lot, and we bounce ideas off each other. And we're just talking about time and the concept of time, and like, man, it's going so fast. What if you could hold on to it? And and I remember he said, he's like, I mean, yeah, it's like the idea of there's this sort of beauty but tragedy of like, your kids are going so fast, you just want to hold on to them and then stop that moment forever. And then that's when it all sort of kind of came together. And from there, it just sort of tumbled forward through lots of just images that I started thinking about. What if I could do? What would I freeze? What would be moments to chase? And that's sort of how it was born, I guess, the idea. And then beyond that, it just kind of snowballed.
Wow. I love that. I mean, you said it's like the beauty and the tragedy, right? That like,
yeah.
There's a humanness to our longing to hold on and our need to move forward and let go. And that's like capturing those 2 things together is an incredible thing.
Great first question. Now it's my turn.
Okay.
So I'm excited. So I really want to know, because I don't know anything about the process on the back end, what happened, how you got there. So what drew you to Inwell's time when you first auditioned? Tell me about like, how did that develop? How did you find this, and how did you get
to
hear
it? Is so interesting, right? As you were saying earlier, like we didn't see each other, we didn't know each other. So on the narrator end, for like a project like this, where sort of there's a site that's a back end, for you all who don't know, back into Audible, where books are posted and narrators and authors are connected for work. And all you see as a narrator is maybe some cover art, the title, a summary, and then a sample. And so they provide you something out of the book, but you just get this little sliver of what it might be. And so it's always this thing. I'm looking through what interests me, what sparks, what sort of gets me excited. I have the luxury of getting to be a little bit picky about the books that I choose to try to work on. And so I am really looking for 2 things at that time, and that's an interesting story and then good writing. And so I have this little sample to try to discern those things from. In this case, I had the summary of the book, which was so cool, interesting to me immediately, this aspect of the family, this sort of loss element that was sort of hanging over it, and this little bit of sci-fi, this stopping time. And that's something that really was super cool to me and interesting right from the get-go. Then I looked at the sample, which was the prologue, which is this great sort of just teaser about this character Wells. And he's so mysterious in those first moments. He's walking through Norfolk and things are dark and there's a hurricane coming, and there's already this foreboding feeling of of he knows more than someone who's 30ish should know, and he feels more deeply than he is. And then he has this cool interaction in the coffee shop with the cat Zeba, and asks this question about Adam and Eve and genes, and sort of this lionization process, these recessive genes and what they mean. And I knew that that was tied to time travel, and how is that going to, or stopping time, and how is that going to come together. And I was so intrigued from the start. And then in that second piece, looking for good writing that I'm excited to read. It's a book I would want to read. Every sentence in it was great, was perfect. It was beautifully crafted prose. There was nothing weird that was catching me off. You don't always get that. You often get one or the other in projects. And this one, I was like a golden egg. There's something that I would love to be a part of. So I did that audition. I shot a little note to the publisher who was looking, and I just really hoped that I might get a chance to read or do a callback or do something for that one. And when the offer came through, I was over the moon. I was so excited that I got a chance to work on this book.
Oh, that's so cool. That is so cool. Well, I know that. So I did the audiobook for my first one.
Yeah.
And I did it in my basement, and like hung up all these blankets and everything and stuff. And like, I remember I was like, I kind of like offers, like I could do it. But she's like, no, the publisher's like, we got this taken care of. And I was like, oh, thank God. Oh, that's so much work. I don't have to do it now. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that is cool.
Cool. Now I get to ask you one. So we talked a little bit about stopping time and this crux. So it's sort of science fiction-y, right? But in another way, this story is extremely grounded. It's a family. There is death. There is loss. There is anticipation. So how do you kind of blend sci-fi-ness, the ability to stop time, with a really real world, and make it feel believable, make us feel like this is something that could happen with our friends and our neighbors? Because it did. It felt that way to me.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think there were some parts that are easier to, there are parts where he's doing things on his own where it's easier to just kind of be like, oh, that could happen. Like, and not really get to fall into the details. And I don't have come back from a background of lots of like formal writing training. And I know that there are decisions that I think as science fiction writers, you have to kind of make. It's like, am I going to explain the science? And which I was like, I can do it with the genetics thing, because I have some biology background. But like some of it, like there's a lot of stuff in there. It's like, if you really wanted to find flaws, you could. But like, I guess some of it is just kind of deciding to just like make up rules and be okay with it. But there were parts where I really felt like, okay, so like being able to stop Lake Superior, but then like restart it without other people around, like, that gets a little like, it's like, well, what's happening to the boat that's 4 miles down the coast? Like they're like you could really go like, I don't know, like maybe all everything's breaking loose and it's just doomsday. But I guess I tried to set up the scenes in a way where he was sort of isolated, or it was controlled. But when there's a scene on an airplane, for instance, that one, like, and I think out of probably being like self-conscious behavior, I like allude to like physics of it. I was like, had to look up. It's like, could you kind of do this? Like, is this impossible? And then I think in the book, I sort of say like, nah, the rules don't apply. Like, I wanted the genetics to make sense in a way that lionization is different for the carriers, and there is a different level of expressivity, because I think that is important to the individuals in the story. But the rest of it, I decided to follow the path of, let's just believe in a little bit of magic. And but I do have him sort of going through some of the risks and benefits of some of it, of being like, oh, I have to kind of be careful how I use this, because I don't want to get people asking questions. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of, I think I got lucky in how the story unfolded, that I could do it in certain ways. But if I got pinned down by a physicist or somebody with like, I don't know, relative theory type science background, I'd be like, sorry, just have fun with it. I don't know.
That's a wonderful answer. You did an awesome job of giving us enough without
Yeah.
belaboring the minutia. So
So bouncing off on that, then, so from a science fiction standpoint and fantasy, for you, um, as a narrator, do you approach those topics um, differently from then in a story like this, where it's not that high fiction or like high sci-fi type Star Wars stuff,
yeah,
to this more real world grounded story?
yeah. You mentioned being a big fan of audiobooks. I too am a huge fan of audiobooks. It took me some time to become one, and especially sci-fi and fantasy. That's what I spend a lot of time reading personally. And I think um, the big difference is when you're in an extra sci-fi world, when you get into some of this crazy hard to believe stuff, or other planets or other species or other things, you make really big choices, and the characters need to feel really like sort of larger than life and feel different enough to kind of feel non-human, and then you find the human moments.
Mhm.
um, and I think the best versions of that world to me are the ones that, like this, feel super grounded as well, feel plausible, and even if they've got really implausible and crazy elements, they use them to tell human stories and to find human truths and to be really grounded in the emotion of the people. And so that's like the space here. I got to play a little more on the human relationships, on how you have conversations, on how you act as a regular person, someone that feels like a believable brother, friend, or neighbor. Um, and then touch into those worlds that were really cool and those super special moments that really use it in unique ways. But yeah, it's that choice of you're focused a little bit more on the big when you're all up in sci-fi and fantasy and the energy and the action, and here you get to take the emotion and put that at the forefront. And I think it should be regardless, but that's sort of the bridge to me.
Cool. I like that.
uh,
Yeah, that actually helps me think about it as like a writer. I'm like, oh, if I were to write something more out there, science fiction, it's like, okay, that's I have to write those characters. I wouldn't have ever thought of that. So you are teaching me. This is good.
yeah, I mean, at least that's how I go about it.
That's good.
um, but yeah, so let's talk about another thing in this story that was really interesting to me. There's a lot of places, like the places themselves are characters. So we kind of go from, like, Minnesota, La Crosse Crescent, Twin Cities, to Norfolk, to the Appalachian Trail, to little forays in like the Midwest and some other
Mhm.
spaces. And they all felt really concrete and tangible. And they all felt like almost little love letters to those places. And so I got the impression reading it, and then from reading about your story, that those places were important to you and that you had experience with at least some of them. So yeah, how much of that was kind of rooted in your own experience?
I mean, most of it, I would say, the short answer. I've done a sort of a circle around the U.S. Through the U.S. and most of those places, I've spent time. I mean, I didn't live in North Platte, Nebraska, but I definitely drove through it and saw those cranes. And I did live in Norfolk, and that it's called Cuddy Sark Marina Bar. This little marina place that it comes up was just had a special place in my heart. It's gone now, so it ended up this definitely in that in particular was a love letter. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to have this. Needs to be essential because I need it for me to live on. Yeah, I mean, it felt this was a story where, I mean, a lot of me is in the story in a lot of different ways, uh, and so they say write what you know, and for me to explore and deal with this concept of time, um, you know, I wanted to experience what Wells experienced, and it gave me a chance to go back to those places, basically. So
Yeah.
uh, there's only only a couple of spots in there, like the diner scene. I haven't been there, but I want to go. It's on my list. I have to go now.
Is it a real place?
It is a real place,
Okay.
and I walked. I had to find one, and so I looked at bus routes, and I was looking at, um, Greyhound bus routes, and I was finding where would we stop and where would fit, and I was looking at schedules. And in Danville, I think that's where it was.
Mhm.
I found this. I mean, just searching towns, I found a diner, and then I went on Google and I found pictures of the diner, and then I was like, okay, I got to figure this out though. And I went on Street View and I walked through that town and I found my way there, and that just helped me. I mean, it helped me bring it in there. And so, but now, I mean, I have to go. I don't know. I mean, I don't know when I will go, but I have to go and order some pie or something.
Yeah. Wow. That is an amazing level of research. That's always so fascinating to me, authors, how those little pieces come together. Very cool.
Well, what was it like bringing those locations and characters to life then? Was it difficult? I don't know if you've been to any of those places. Was that hard for you?
Yeah. Bits of it were. So I have not spent really any time in the Midwest and in Minnesota. And so that being a crux of the book,
Mhm.
especially after coming from this sample where I knew Norfolk and I knew the family, but then I got the full book and I was like, oh, there's 6 characters in this family, who live in this place, and bringing that to life from a voice perspective. And we talked about it early on, keeping accents sort of subtle and choosing when to turn those dials up for certain characters based on age and location and all those things. So that was really funny for me. But I also found it funny that as I read it, there were a lot of parts I could really relate to. I grew up in a really small town in Tennessee, sort of very close to the Appalachian Trail,
Yep.
with a lot of hiking and a lot of that. So I got the small townness of La Crescent Lacrosse, and then I got the Appalachian Trail scenes. I was like, I know all these people. I know these trails. I know this vibe, and I grew up with people who were from Norfolk and for Virginia Beach, and we used to go up there a lot. And I have my favorite sort of seafood spots there. So all of that felt very visceral to
Mhm.
me reading it. So it was kind of cool finding those pieces and the places. Yeah, easy for me to jump into Southern and easy for me to jump into a couple of things, but definitely a fun performing experience. Kind of spending some time researching, learning a bit more about the Minnesota accent, the differences, the distinctions, and then kind of people tend to go a little far with accents often, and I tend to
Mhm.
find that if you pull them back, you learn how to do it the far way, and then you pull it back enough to be more regular, more like your neighbor you would actually meet and talk to. It feels a lot better.
Yeah.
But very cool. Yeah, next question I have for you. Let's see. Yeah, so we know about the places were great. The family is the core of this story, right? And you talked about your kids and your family being obviously a big motivator for you. Um, Tell me something, a little bit about the Monosmiths and your sort of what you got from them throughout the writing process.
So, and there's a funny thing. I think if you knew the family that I come from, I do have 3 siblings. I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister. So yeah, I think it could be easy to us, and this family is 3 sisters and 1 boy. I think it could be easy to assume that my siblings are somehow manifested in these characters, but in reality, I sort of I had this little sheet of paper and I made these little chapbooks with like little scraps and prints and drawings and poems. I should just make one. For when I like if I do a little event and I give them out. But I had this sheet of paper that had just like the little family tree of who these characters were. And I was thinking about birth order, and then really I was thinking about the different versions of myself for each of the siblings. Um, so we have a very career driven one. We have one who is really tied to just like family first and almost like above all else. And then we have Wells, who has his own issues and finding himself. And then we have another sister who is sort of um, she lives by sort of her emotions but is okay with it in a way. Um, and so like I sort of see little pieces of me in each character in each of those siblings. And I wanted, and like none of them, the point is like, sorry, I'm not sure if this gets to other questions, but none of them are wrong. And I was trying to start, I guess in a way it's sort of like letting myself know that too. Like they're just different choices of how we live and spend our time. But and then and then there's sort of the matriarch and patriarch and just showing the love between them. And there's actually a couple chapters that didn't make it into the book that are really cool. That one of them was my favorite one to write, and I will see if I can find a way to get that out somewhere for later on or something, maybe another edition of the book or something. But yeah, I don't know. So that's the details about the family that maybe that people wouldn't know, or maybe they would assume it was about my family, but really it's just about me. Selfish. I think about myself.
That's so cool.
What did you learn from the Monosmith family?
Oh my gosh. A lot. It's funny when I was thinking about them, um, I felt bits of me in all of them. And now hearing you say that that's why it is a separation of one individual, it makes so much sense. But they each felt really full, right? They just felt like they had priorities. And it's really funny how, like, hearing you talk about it, we all have those pieces and how they live together and how they fight against each other at times, in ourselves. But like, yeah, Monica's ambition and Heather's sort of emotions forward, worries, fears for her family, that strong, strong love coming through always. Leslie's in this sort of stuck phase of life. It did to me feel like different phases of myself and different pieces of myself. And it's really just made me like each of them was a nice reminder and a mirror back to, like, as I live my life, catch which part is most active, catch which part isn't getting the right love, and kind of reflect on how I spend my time, which priorities really rise to the surface. And that was really the whole, book was a lot of reflection on, hey, what should I be doing? What should I really be caring about here and now? So they just gave me a lot of lessons and a lot of laughs also. All of them had so many good sort of quips and peccadillos and personal character bits that just felt so solid and felt like they were such real people. So fascinating to know that they're not really based on separate individuals.
Yeah.
You did a wonderful job creating complexities in them from that space.
Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, I really liked I loved the Monosmiths, and as I tell people about the book, I'm like, you're gonna like all of them so much, and you're not gonna know, how to choose who you like and who you resonate with, because there's bits of all of it there.
Yeah.
So obviously, this story comes from, a lot of personal places. It's very special. Books always are, but this one, you put a lot of yourself into. We talked a little bit at the start, but what is it like letting that go and hearing someone else sort of tackle it in a totally different voice?
It's really fun, I guess. I mean, so I got to hear a sample from you, obviously, on the back end. But when I, used my Audible credit that I had there, it's like, can I use it this month for my Bowen book? She's like, okay, and it's like, okay, all right, and I'm gonna listen to like someone read this story to to me, and it was just fun. And because I think that, one, there is this thing where the further you get away from something you write, you kind of forget you wrote it, or you go, who was that person who wrote it? Because I'm in a different space then, now than then, and so the words come at you, even if I was just to sit down and read it to myself, which I do live reading, so I have a couple chapters that I'll always read, and they just, and I'm, but like I read it differently than you too, in some spots, and that's good and okay, and like I said, it's just fun. I think that's about the best word I can say for it, because it's like it removes you even a little bit further from the story when you hear someone else read it to you, because even when you read it yourself, you're like, I don't remember writing it this way, and maybe even sometimes you have a tendency to want to change something, that perfectionist in you as an author, even if it's just like a comma or something weird. But adding that next level of hearing, a professional actor, play this out, removes you even further. And I think it's like the closest I could get to being able to see it or hear it through, like, to see it the way someone else would, I guess. So I mean, I kept going like, it's funny. I like the movie, getting very far ahead of myself here. The movie, the story. It's the longest thing I've ever written, but it goes fast. It goes so fast. And I'm like, how could we already be here? How could we already be this spot? And that, which is just crazy because it doesn't seem like a short book. I don't really know. It's not like 100,000
Mhm.
words, but still,
Yeah,
like. So anyway, it was fun. It was just fun.
I'm really glad to hear that.
um, I mean, so I mean, for you then, how do you approach narrating someone else's words and like living in that world? I mean, we talked a little bit about like the accents and stuff that was new for you, but
Yeah.
just in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm processing as I'm hearing you talk about it because it's informing how I'm thinking and feeling. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's obviously like I'm a writer also myself, I do that too, and I know how precious words are and that perfectionist streak you're talking about. And every story, no matter how much we fictionalize it, comes from ourselves and our way of thinking and our heart and our feelings we've had and our stories. And so it's so personal. And I think it's really important to just honor that and respect it and try your best to find the sort of love for each and every character and moment and then bring that to life. So like to me it's really important to like read the book a couple times before you ever attack it, um, so that you know it and you know where it's going and you see the characters and their growth, so you get a more holistic picture of the authors because my first read is always different than my like third read, and so it gives me a lot more to just spend that time with it. But really, it's just a gift to get to try that, and it's a weird experience on this end too because you have a fear of of getting it wrong, and then you have your own perfectionisms in terms of like listening to it and being like, oh, why did I say that way? But you do a lot of takes and you try a lot and you listen to it 3 ways that you said it different ways, and you pick one and then you come back and listen to it and you're like, hey, it was a different one. It was number 4 that I never got to. But you try your best to enjoy it, and as you said, as you get time separated, then you get to enjoy it in a new way. But from a standpoint outside of being read as a book, I got to love it so much the first time. And then I just got to try to bring what my experience of loving it to life for other people. Um, so I don't have much of an answer besides it's super weird on this end too. But it's a
Okay,
cool thing to do.
perfect. It's cool and fun and weird. Perfect.
It's cool and fun and
Same.
weird. And it's probably some of that for the readers too. They
Yeah.
probably have some of the similar emotions.
Um,
Um, we touched on this, I think, a bit, but were there surprises or sort of discoveries when you visited it again, especially the time between writing it and then working on it and then hearing it? A lot of time did pass.
um, Gosh, I can't remember if there was any actual scenes that I forgot that I had written. I think there was one musician I forgot I had brought up. I have a friend who I'm friends with this musician, and I slid their CD in there, and continue to become much more popular. And so I put them in there, and I was like, oh, that's sort of funny that I did that. That was Humbird.
I
Um,
was going to ask.
Amazing musician. Siri Undelin is her name. She's based out of Minneapolis, and sometimes this Driftless area. But so I had kind of forgotten that, and also I think the speed at which the story comes to a conclusion. It's like, wow, I really I almost felt like, even though the book is about stopping time, it was just like rattling by. And then so I was surprised by that. And then there was a time where I wasn't sure if I was going to put in this last little cup of coffee scene in the
Yeah.
book. I did different feedback about that. And I mean, everyone is different. The what tastes in stories are different, and just like music or food or anything else. And hearing it, I was really glad I left it in. I liked it. I just liked kind of this sort of exhale that it finished with. So that was something that listening to it again was just reaffirming, and I really so and I think part of that has to do with just how you delivered it, and so that was really good. You know, I mean, you said you read it multiple times, which is super impressive. Like, I can't think of many books I've read multiple times, and maybe a couple. So like, kudos to you for doing your homework. So I mean, for you then, like, as you peeled through as you got through those rereads, besides a few errors, thank you very much. What did you? What sort of stuff did you find?
Yeah, you know, I learned each time going through it different things, like motivations, builds in the character growth, little like tidbits that I'd like glossed over, and then feeling the build of them to where it was going, knowing how the whole story grows. I think that's often for me the biggest thing is those kernels are so expertly woven in at the start, and maybe on the first time something feels like, oh, that's cool, but you don't fully catch it. And maybe you get to the end and you remember it. But if you go back and read it again, if you experience it again, then you really get to like be like, oh wow, if he had this seed planted and the way it grew. But yeah, I mean, specific discoveries. I mean, yeah, just each read was more growth, more love for the characters. I'm really glad you kept in that epilogue you're talking about. I think the book is beautiful ending before that, but I remember, sort of the process of recording for every, hour that you record, you're spending multiple, recording multiple takes and then piecing them together and then playing with it and then editing and all of the things. And I remember, I'd been a couple months into this and getting towards those last chapters. I was like, oh, just the last little bit to go, just get through this and get it. And then it being that. And I was like, this scene is so beautiful. And it's one of my favorite scenes. I can't like fold it in now. Like I have to spend, so I spent, as much or more time on that chapter than others because it was so gorgeous. I couldn't like not do it justice. So yeah, I'm glad you kept that in. It is a beautiful scene. I like it a lot. Yeah, you just learn each things. And I think with each reread and for myself getting to listen to it again after having done it, I'm like, oh, this is good. Oh, I can actually listen to it without getting caught up in it. And so caught up in my own delivery that I can't enjoy the story. It was really the pleasure to come back to and feel those emotions and go through it all again. So that's awesome. I'm going to jump to another question, but just a question for you that's not a does Humbird do that song Pharmacon?
Yes.
Amazing song. Been on my spot. This is not a paid endorsement for Humbird. We just are fans, but very cool.
Yes.
I remember catching that when I was reading it. And I was like, I think they have that song that I love.
Yes. Yep. No, that is her. It's a phenomenal song, and she continues to put out amazing material. That's when she does come out east sometimes, and if you can ever catch her, it is a whole experience.
Amazing. I'm in the PNW now, so I'm on West Coast.
Oh,
so I might catch her this side. Yeah.
yes. I know they go there sometimes. So.
Well, awesome.
Yes.
I just have another thought, but I'll let it skip. Yeah, this is probably a really tough thing to ask. But do you have a favorite scene?
The reason it's tough for me to answer it is because it's the favorite scene that I wrote is the one that is cut and not in the book. But it just didn't progress the plot really well, and I got wise advice from the editing team at Unsolicited Press just to really consider. They're like, the pace, everything is moving really well, and then there are these like sort of like commercial breaks, and it's like, oh, it was so hard. There are two chapters, there are a couple spaces in this book we have chapters or kind of sections that are the same scene but from different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
And it was just sort of it was a scene that was sort of it just showed, I think, the relationship between Charles and Margaret. Like I'm one of those like Minnesotans that like it's like, oh, it's snowing, yay, like again, and I like the snow, and then I love to shovel. Like I like shoveling snow. And which is good because my wife does not, so that's why we fit. But I just like the process. I like it's like, I'm the checking the window, like, okay, yeah, another inch. I'm gonna shovel now, and then I'll wake up at 3 and shovel again. That way I can slide easier in the
Nice.
morning. So it's like, but there's a shoveling snow scene, and but it's about thoughtfulness, and then there's a paired scene of what's happening inside as Margaret's like, oh, he's gonna have to go, there he's
Yeah.
gonna go again. And I mean, but it's just about their marriage and their relationship, um and so yeah, that was I think my favorite thing to write, at least at that time. But I really like the ending, and and then I think the other part, I guess, is the early on when we get to sort of the Monosmith house,
Mhm.
Charles and Margaret's place, and you have lots of things happening at once, like, and lots of characters, and we're kind of following everybody. It
Yeah.
was piecing that together took a lot of just work, and so it was a challenge, and it was fun. And when I started feeling like I was getting it, it became more fun. So those are the things that were most fun to write.
Amazing. Hope to see the secret scene someday. I lived in a little house in Syracuse with my twin brother, and neither one of us liked to shovel snow, so that was a problem. We get snowed in a lot.
Well, at least it's like even you can grumble about it or something and
Yes.
decide. Yeah. Did you have a favorite scene to narrate then?
Yes, so tough because there's so many good ones. And here you talk about, I'm like, yeah, that one was great too. Oh, that one was great too. 2 really stick out. The first one is the sort of Christmas flashback when Wells is a little boy, and he first sort of uses this ability without kind of consciously knowing he is, and his father sort of finds him in that moment because it felt so universal. It felt the joy of Christmas, a little cabin, a family together. It felt so just cool, that moment and his wonder and his joy and his excitement, and then that paired with a father sort of and his realization of what might be coming, and that sort of heartbreak of that. I just remember it hitting me sort of like a ton of bricks the first time I read that, and then getting to perform that was super fun too. And then the second one, it's kind of these first moments are always really fun as a narrator because you're diving into new territory. Is the sort of lightning bolt scene, the first sort of conscious use of it, as a teenager. And then you've got all this cool stuff happening with the family and this first discovery and the uncertainty of it. And it's really trippy. And there's a cool energy to that scene as well, that there's a storm and there's premonition and there's power. So it was just a really fun one to dive into. And it was another one that I remember on my first read before performing it being really just stopped by and being like, wow, that was an awesome chapter. I can't wait to sort of try to dive into this. And so they lived up to it. They were both super fun to narrate. So I would say those starting moments are really fun for me, but the whole thing was great.
Yeah.
So out of all of this awesome book, there's a ton to learn and to take away, and awesome stuff in the book here. If you could only have readers take away sort of one thing from the novel and from Wells's journey, what would be the sort of most important thing to you?
I think for me, there's so many ways to spend your time, whether it's during the day or on a Saturday morning, or in a year or whatever, a season of your life or whatever. Um, so I think just recognizing that, and it may not always be practical to do whatever you want and or get up and travel or leave responsibility or those things. Um, but you can be intentional about um, how you choose to leave your house. You can be intentional about you know what you do first. I mean, if you got if you have an hour in the morning on Saturday and you're sitting your cup of coffee and you have like, oh, I want to do all these things. It's like, well, at the end of the day, what's one thing that you would go, gosh, I wish I would have done that. Do it first. Like we can be intentional about how we use our time, and it's easy to say, hard to practice. But I think that there isn't a right or wrong. And I don't feel that way about how to be career motivated or to be family motivated or whatever. It's life. And we're just, it's all messy. And but if you're just being a little bit more mindful about it, maybe there's a little more opportunity for joy and some presence of mind. So I guess that would be my hope, that someone would just a little bit of mindfulness about a choice they make. And that's it.
That's awesome. That's that's beautiful. What's cool is that earlier when you asked what I had taken away from it, I kind of said something like that, which is means you nailed it. People are taking that away already. So that's pretty dope.
Well, I guess my last question for you, which we kind of talked about before, and is, and I want to, I mean, I'm not sure if how people have been following us through this discussion, but I want to thank everybody who has been with us. Just listen to us chat, and thank you and Summer, and and anyone who spends time with the story, whether in audio or reading. Well, for you, what Monosmith character resonated most with you? Was there one? Can you pick one?
Yeah. Wells, I think, is my easy, immediate brain choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sort of longing to spend your life as fully as possible, I think, is something we all can feel really deeply, and the selfishness that can come out of that, for sure. But then secondary to that, I really, really loved Leslie, because it kind of represented the next step in that phase to me. It was like the hope of what you could do with it, if you have a little bit more knowledge, if you have a little more of the possibilities of what's next. So her story really, I found myself really hopeful for her and wondering what was going to happen next. So I thought that was super cool.
She's fun. She's fun. Leslie's fun.
Well,
They're
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, David, so much for allowing me to be a part of this. This whole process has been great. As I said, the book is wonderful. For anyone who hasn't got a chance to check it out yet, check out the audiobook, check out the print book, whichever version works best for you. It is well worth it. David did a phenomenal job. And one thing I was going to say earlier with the music is also I love the songs you sort of weave throughout. And one thing I did, and I highly recommend to others, is when you hit a song in the story, turn it on in the background and feel the vibes. And I think David nailed the vibes. And this is truly, truly a beautiful story that has the power to change people. It is something that should be shared. And I hope a lot of people get a chance to check it out, because I just think it is a story that makes the world a little bit better for it being out there. And I think that's a really cool thing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That means so much to me.
This has been great, David.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I gotta figure out if I can get out to Pacific Northwest now. You both are there, so now I gotta get out there.
Yes, yeah, gotta come out this way. Thank you, Unsolicited Press, Summer, the whole team. It has been wonderful.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm gonna see if there's a way we can
skedaddle on out of here.
Stop and